Going around the horn here, Chamath, who did the best job in the hearings? I don't know if you saw all of them or just clips, but who do you think shined?
I only saw, to be honest with you, your recap, which I thought was frankly really, really good. When we should probably link to that in the show notes so people can listen to it. I saw a couple of answers. The thing that jumped off the page to me was I read a little bit of Bezos' statement. I thought it was pretty fire. I thought he did the best job kind of positioning himself. But the reality is, it's kind of what I said a few days earlier on CNBC, but I just thought going in, this whole thing was set up to be kind of performative theater, and it basically was that. The level of questions are just so poor, the level of understanding is so bad, and then people just use it as a way to grandstand, and everybody did. I wasn't completely blown away by any of it, to be quite honest.
What do you think, Friedberg? Who had the best showing in those hearings?
I think Zuck was the most kind of eloquent in the on-point responses. He was super, super well prepped for this thing. I think Bezos and others were obviously, they had great kind of prep work done for their statement. But in terms of like warding off the attacks, I think Zuck did a great job. It was weird. It didn't feel like Tim Cook should have been there. It was like kind of a random thing that he was there because everyone had an axe to grind. And the axe that everyone had to grind was a little bit different. It wasn't like this was a true objective discussion about, antitrust. And so the axe that people had to grind were kind of pointed at Google and Facebook and Amazon in different ways. Tim Cook was kind of, hey, yeah, this is cool. You guys go ahead and give your responses. I'm going to go back to work.
And do you think that's because Apple does not have a monopoly position on a numbers basis in any one era, or because their products are so loved and universally, used?
Well, I think it's actually a function of what these companies do. So if you look at the Jim Jordan rant, I don't know if you guys watched this, but Jim Jordan did this big rant at the opening.
The worst.
And he went on and on. And the first thing he said, he's like, big tech is out to get conservatives. And then he went on and gave all these examples about how Twitter has been pulling down Donald Trump's tweets and flagging them, and Facebook's been canceling certain people on the platform. And his whole axe to grind was really about censorship on social media platforms, which has fucking nothing to do with antitrust and has nothing to do with Apple's business. And so, yeah, I guess my point is and then other people have issues with Google's dominance in ads and Amazon's impact on local business. And so there wasn't much of an axe to grind, frankly, with Apple. At the end of the day, as I said, I just don't think that it was a function of, a true kind of objective antitrust approach. And it was just more about hey, we've all got different things we want to address. And we finally got these guys here. Let's beat them up. And,
Sacks, what do you think? You with Friedberg that it was performance art, or do you think that, or performative rather, do you think that there are actually substantive issues that came up during the hearings that we should discuss here?
Well, it was both. Certainly there was a tremendous amount of grandstanding and political theater, and the politicians on both sides wanted to take shots at the companies for various reasons. I mean, I think they have a slightly different hierarchy of hate. I think the left sort of hates Facebook the most because they blame it for Trump's election, which I think is kind of a ridiculous scapegoating. Which we should talk more about. But and then I think the right is most suspicious towards Google. But I think there are legitimate issues here as that were brought up, and I think the congressional hearing did score some hit points. And I think your previous pod did a good job showing some of those. These hearings were teed up apparently over the past year by a series of subpoenas of records that the committee. This is the House subcommittee on antitrust had teed up. And so there were some moments where I thought that, the representative scored some hits on, Facebook and Google.
What do you think who took the biggest hit in all of this? Who do you think has the most, putting aside all this performance, obviously, and the politicization of everything in our country, and Jim Jordan, who to me is like he's like the dad at the baseball game, who like the little league game, who runs on the court and pushes the umpire and gets banned for the season. Like he just yells over everybody for no reason. But what was the punch that landed that is the most valid as we go around the horn one more time here? Now that we got our initial thoughts about it, what punch landed the squarest in one of these companies' faces?
Well, let me set this up. I think there were three big areas of concern where just about all the companies, with maybe the exception of Amazon, took hits. Although even Bezos took hits. I think one is with respect to anti-competitive actions that these platforms are taking, particularly with respect to the applications or small businesses that operate and are dependent on those platforms. I think all of the companies were interrogated about that. Bezos took a hit when he had to admit or concede that the company may not have always followed its policy with respect to using its third-party sellers' data to figure out how to compete with them. Google was interrogated about snippets. There was news today, actually, just out of Australia, that the government's going to order Google to pay small businesses for the use of its content for snippets, which so the regulations are kind of heating up on this. But the sort of the first area was sort of anti-competitive, and I think Facebook took some hits with respect to the Instagram acquisition, which Congressman Nadler really went after him, and then I think Jayapal as well, and that's a tremendously threatening issue for Facebook, because if it is forced to divest Instagram, it would just be crippling for the company.
All right, so let's talk more about that. Yeah, let's take. But
Jason, just set the table. Two other issues that I think came up. I'll just very briefly. Number two is sort of cozying up to China. I think Google is the one that's most vulnerable here. And then the third issue is sort of this issue of censorship and bias with respect to content and politics in the election,
which has nothing to do with antitrust, the censorship issue. So let's table that one.
I think